The wolf's jaws clamped down on the warrior's forearm, and the sound that came out of that man's throat wasn't a scream. It was something lower, something broken, something that made every single person standing at the edge of that training yard take a full step backward. Blood hit the dirt before anyone could move, and the warrior, a 6'4" alpha named Kael, who had never lost a fight in 12 years of pack service, dropped to one knee with his teeth clenched so hard you could hear them grinding from 20 feet away. What happened in the next 48 hours would become Ashwood Pack legend, a story whispered about for decades, the story of a wolf that couldn't be broken by the strongest, the fastest, or the most decorated fighters in the territory, and the nobody, the absolute bottom of the rank nobody, who walked straight into the middle of it all and did what none of them could. Let me take you there. Ashwood Pack controlled about 400 square miles of mountain forest in the northern range. Tough terrain, cold rivers, deep ravines, the kind of land that didn't forgive weakness. Their alpha, a broad-shouldered wall of a man named Ronan, ran the pack with discipline and earned respect. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't soft. He was the guy you followed into a storm because you knew he'd already figured out which way the wind was blowing. But Ronan had a problem, and that problem had 4 legs, black fur, and absolutely zero interest in following anyone's orders. They called the wolf Fang. Not creative, I know, but the name fit. Fang was a wild-born wolf, not a shifter, not pack-raised, but a full-blooded, forest-born predator who had been found as an adolescent raiding their livestock on the eastern border. Now Ashwood didn't kill wolves. That was a core rule. Wolves were sacred in their culture, connected to the spirit of every shifter in the pack. So Ronan gave the order, capture Fang. Bring him in, tame him, bond him to a handler. Simple enough, right? Believe me, it was anything but. Fang had been in their holding enclosure for 3 weeks by the time the story really starts. In those 3 weeks, he'd bitten 4 handlers, escaped twice, destroyed a reinforced kennel gate that was supposed to hold a bear, and put the pack's best animal trainer in the medical ward with a gash across her shoulder that needed 42 stitches. 42. The trainers started refusing the assignment. The warriors stepped in. That's where Kael comes back into the picture. Kael was Ronan's top enforcer. Fast, strong, tactical. He'd taken down rogue shifters twice his size. He walked into that enclosure on a Tuesday morning with a leather muzzle in one hand and a chain lead in the other, and he told the 2 guards standing outside, "Give me 10 minutes." He lasted 90 seconds. Fang didn't charge him. That was the thing everybody talked about afterward. The wolf didn't rush. He circled, slow, calculated. His yellow eyes locked on Kael's hands, tracking the muzzle, tracking the chain, reading every micro-movement. Kael stepped left. Fang mirrored. Kael feinted forward. Fang didn't flinch, and then the moment Kael shifted his weight to lunge, Fang exploded, not toward Kael's body, but toward his leading arm. The arm holding the muzzle. The wolf knew. He targeted the tool, not the man. And when those jaws locked down, Kael's forearm became a wreck of torn muscle and cracked bone. 2 guards rushed in. Fang released Kael and backed into the far corner of the enclosure, completely calm, blood on his muzzle, watching them drag the enforcer out. No panic, no wild thrashing, just efficiency. Ronan was standing at the fence when they pulled Kael through the gate. The alpha's jaw tightened. He looked at the wolf. The wolf looked right back. "Nobody else goes in alone," Ronan said. "We do this as a unit. Get this." Over the next 4 days, Ronan sent in teams, 2 warriors at a time. Then 3. They tried nets. They tried sedation darts. Fang dodged the first 2 and bit through the net before the 3rd one could be loaded. They tried cornering him with wooden shields. The wolf went vertical, scrambled up the enclosure wall, hung from the top rail with his front claws and dropped behind the shield line. One warrior took a bite to the calf. Another caught a claw strike across the back of his hand that severed a tendon. 5 warriors injured in 4 days. No progress. 0. Fang wouldn't submit, wouldn't tire, and wouldn't make the same mistake any handler tried to exploit twice. The wolf was learning faster than the people trying to control him. The pack started talking. You know how it goes in a tight community. Whispers in the mess hall, low voices around the fire pits. Some people said put the wolf down. Others said release him back into the wild and forget the whole thing. A few of the elders said Fang was a spirit wolf, a test from the old gods, and that forcing submission would bring bad luck to the territory. Ronan shut all of it down in a pack meeting. We don't kill sacred animals. We don't abandon them. We find a way. His voice didn't leave room for debate, but behind his eyes there was something the people close to him noticed, frustration shading into doubt. The Alpha was running out of ideas. And that's when the Omega enters the story. Here's what nobody tells you about Ashwood Pack's Omega. His name was Eli, 23 years old, thin, quiet, the kind of guy who sat at the end of the table and didn't talk unless someone asked him a direct question, and even then his answers were short. He worked in the Pack's supply warehouse, inventory, stocking shelves, hauling crates, manual labor, invisible work. He had no combat training, no rank, no standing in the pack hierarchy beyond the very bottom rung. Omegas in Ashwood weren't mistreated, but they weren't seen. They existed in the background, doing the jobs nobody else wanted, eating last, sleeping in the smallest quarters. Eli had been an Omega since he presented at 16. 7 years of being overlooked. 7 years of being the guy people moved past in hallways without a nod. But Eli had a habit that most people didn't know about. Every night after his shift in the warehouse, he walked the perimeter trail that ran behind the holding enclosures. He'd been doing it for years. It was his quiet time, his 1 hour of solitude. And for the past 3 weeks, that trail had taken him right past Fang's enclosure. He never approached the fence. He never tried to interact. He just walked past, every single night at the same time, at the same pace, breathing the same air. And Fang noticed. I swear this happened. On the 5th night after Kyle got bitten, one of the perimeter guards saw something that made her stop in her tracks. Eli was walking the trail, same as always, and Fang was pressed against the fence on the side closest to the path. Not growling, not pacing, just standing there, nose through the chain link, watching Eli walk. The guard told her shift partner. Her shift partner told a friend. The friend told someone who mentioned it at breakfast within earshot of Ronan's second-in-command, a sharp-eyed beta woman named Dara. Dara went to the enclosure the next evening and hid behind the equipment shed. She watched. Sure enough, Eli appeared on the trail at exactly 9:15. And sure enough, Fang moved to the fence and tracked him. The wolf's body language was completely different from anything Dara had observed during the training attempts. No tension, no predatory focus. His ears were forward but relaxed. His tail was neutral. He was curious, interested. Dara went straight to Ronan. Absolutely not, Ronan said. He was standing over a map table in his office, arms crossed. I'm not sending an untrained Omega into an enclosure with an animal that's hospitalized 5 of my best fighters. Dara didn't back down. I'm not saying send him in. I'm saying the wolf is responding to him. That's more than we've gotten from anyone. He walks past a fence. That's not a response. That's proximity. The wolf pressed against the fence, Ronan, voluntarily. You saw what he did when Kyle got within 10 feet. He went into attack mode. This is different. Ronan's hands gripped the edge of the map table. His knuckles went white. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Bring the Omega to me." Now look, Eli didn't know any of this was happening. He'd heard about the wild wolf. Everyone had. But it was warrior business, alpha business, none of his concern business. So when Dara showed up at the warehouse at 7 in the morning and told him the alpha wanted to see him, Eli's first thought was that he'd miscounted inventory and was about to get chewed out. He walked into Ronan's office with his shoulders drawn in and his eyes on the floor. Standard Omega posture. Habit. Ronan studied him for a moment. You walk the perimeter trail every night. It wasn't a question, but Eli nodded. Past the wolf enclosure. Another nod. Why? Eli's brow creased. It's the only trail that's empty after dark. That answer hung in the air. Ronan unfolded his arms. Something in his expression shifted, just barely, just enough for Dara to catch it. A crack in the command mask. The Alpha recognized something in that answer. Loneliness. The need for space that no one was willing to give you. He knew that feeling from somewhere deep and old in his own history, even if he'd never say it out loud. The wolf watches you, Ronan said. When you walk past, he comes to the fence. He doesn't do that for anyone else. Eli's eyes came up from the floor for the first time. He does? I want you to try something. Not inside the enclosure, just at the fence. Controlled, guards present. I want you to stand at the fence and see what happens. Alpha. I don't know anything about wolves. Neither did anyone else who went in there. At least you haven't bled yet. Dara almost cracked a grin. She held it. Eli stood at the edge of that enclosure fence at 4 p.m. with 2 armed guards behind him, Dara to his left, and Ronan watching from the observation platform above. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs to hide it. Fang was in the far corner, lying down, head on his paws. The wolf's yellow eyes tracked the group. His lip curled slightly when he registered the guards. A low rumble started in his chest. Trust me on this part, because it's where everything starts to turn. Eli did something that no warrior, no trainer, no handler had done in 3 weeks of failed attempts. He sat down, right there on the ground, back against the fence, facing away from the wolf. He didn't look at Fang. He didn't speak. He didn't move toward the enclosure. He just sat, cross-legged in the dirt, staring at the tree line. Dara looked at Ronan. Ronan's hand came up. Wait. 5 minutes passed. The guards shifted their weight. Dara checked her watch. Eli didn't move. Fang lifted his head. Another 5 minutes. The wolf stood up. He stretched, a long full-body stretch, front paws forward, back arched. Then he started walking, not toward the fence, parallel to it, back and forth, but each pass brought him 2 feet closer. Eli's breathing was steady. His hands had stopped shaking. He could hear the wolf's paw pads on the hard-packed dirt, getting closer with each pass. He didn't turn around. 20 minutes in, Fang was at the fence, directly behind Eli. Close enough that Eli could feel the warmth of the wolf's breath on the back of his neck through the chain link. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Fang pressed his nose through the gap in the fence and touched the back of Eli's shoulder. Eli flinched, just barely, just a twitch of his muscles, but he stayed seated. He didn't turn. He didn't pull away. He let the wolf's cold nose rest against his shirt. Fang held there for 3 seconds. Then he pulled back, walked to the center of the enclosure, lay down, and closed his eyes. Ronan let out a breath he'd been holding for the entire 20 minutes. He looked at Dara. She looked back. Neither of them said a word, but the message was clear. This is the one. Now here's where it gets complicated. Ronan couldn't just hand the assignment to Eli and walk away. The pack had structure, protocol, hierarchy, and the hierarchy said that Omegas didn't handle tactical operations. Period. When word got out that Ronan was considering putting Eli on the Wolf Project, the pushback was immediate. Kyle, his arm in a sling and his pride in worse shape, confronted Ronan in the training yard the next morning. "You're going to let a warehouse clerk do what your warriors couldn't?" Ronan didn't blink. "I'm going to let the person the wolf responds to do what force couldn't. It's a wild animal. It needs to be dominated. You send in someone with no authority, no power, and that wolf will eat him alive. You had authority and power, Kyle. Show me your arm." Kyle's jaw clenched. He turned and walked away, but the damage was done. The warrior class was watching. If Eli failed, it would be an embarrassment Ronan couldn't recover from easily. If Eli succeeded, it would mean every assumption about strength and rank in Ashwood would need re-examining. Ronan knew both of those things. He made the call anyway. You don't hear that part of the story often. The part where the alpha risked his own standing on a hunch about a kid who counted boxes for a living. That's the kind of decision that either makes you a visionary or a fool, and you don't find out which one until it's too late to change course. Eli went back to the enclosure every day, morning and evening, same routine. He sat outside the fence, back to the wolf, and waited. Day 2, Fang approached the fence in 15 minutes instead of 20. Day 3, 12 minutes. Day 4, The wolf was already at the fence when Eli arrived, waiting for him. On day 5, Eli spoke for the first time. Not commands, not training words, he just talked. Low and even, barely above a murmur. He talked about the warehouse, about the crates that came in from the southern trade route and how the labels were always smudged, about the way the floorboards creaked in the cold storage room, about nothing, about everything. Fang lay down on his side of the fence and listened. His tail moved. Not a wag. Wolves don't wag their tails the way dogs do, but a slow, deliberate sweep across the ground. Calm, content. Day 7. This is the day. Mark this one. Ronan authorized Eli to enter the enclosure. No guards inside. Eli's only condition. He won't come near me if there's a threat behind me, Eli said, and the fact that he said it with certainty, without hesitation, made Dara raise an eyebrow. The Omega who'd barely made eye contact a week ago was speaking with quiet authority about an animal that had terrorized the pack's best fighters. Eli walked through the enclosure gate at 6 in the morning. The air was cold. His breath came out in thin clouds. He had nothing in his hands, no muzzle, no chain, no sedation tools, just himself. Fang was in the center of the enclosure, standing, ears forward, watching the gate close behind Eli. The wolf's posture shifted when the gate latched, tighter, alert. This was different from the fence. This was shared space, no barrier, just 30 feet of open ground between a 140-pound wild wolf and a 160-pound Omega, with no training and no weapon. Eli sat down, same position, cross-legged, facing away. The guards outside gripped their tranquilizer rifles. Ronan stood on the observation platform, hands on the railing, leaning forward. Dara was beside him, her fingers wrapped around a radio transmitter, thumb on the call button. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3. Fang moved. Not a circle this time, a straight line. Direct. Purposeful. The wolf walked right up to Eli's back, and the guards raised their rifles. Ronan's hand shot out toward Dara Hold. Fang lowered his head. He pressed his nose into the curve of Eli's neck. Not a nip, not a test bite. A nuzzle. The wolf inhaled deeply, drawing in Eli's scent, and then exhaled a long, warm breath against Eli's skin. Eli's hand came up. Slow. So slow it barely looked like movement. His fingers touched the underside of Fang's jaw. The wolf went still. Every muscle in that animal's body locked. I'm telling you, every person watching stopped functioning for about 5 seconds. Hearts didn't beat, lungs didn't work. The whole world narrowed down to that one point of contact, a human hand on a wild wolf's jaw. Fang leaned into the touch. His eyes closed halfway. His body weight shifted toward Eli, pressing gently against the Omega's shoulder. And then, in a movement that made Dara's hand fall away from the radio transmitter, Fang lay down, right next to Eli, side against side. Full body contact. The wolf put his head on Eli's thigh and let out a sound that was somewhere between a groan and a sigh. And that was it. That was the moment. The most dangerous animal Ashwood Pack had ever encountered. The wolf that had torn through warriors and trainers and shattered every protocol they had, was lying in the lap of an Omega, breathing slow and easy, choosing trust over territory for the first time in his life. Ronan's grip on the railing loosened. He straightened up. He didn't say anything for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Clear the guards. Give them space." Kyle was watching from the ground level, standing near the equipment shed. His good hand was clenched at his side. His face was doing something complicated. Anger and confusion fighting for control, and underneath both of those, something that looked suspiciously close to awe. He'd spent his whole life believing that strength was the answer, that dominance solved problems, that you earned respect by being the most dangerous thing in the room. And here was this kid, this quiet, invisible kid, doing with patience what Kyle's entire warrior toolkit couldn't touch. He turned and walked away. But he didn't walk toward the barracks. He walked toward the medical ward. And when he got there, he sat down next to the trainer who'd taken 42 stitches to the shoulder, a woman named Sarah, and he said, "You were right. You told us weeks ago to try a soft approach. I should have listened. Sarah looked at him. She didn't gloat. She didn't say, I told you so. She just nodded and said, the kid's got something. Let him work. That's the part they don't put in the legends, by the way. The part where the tough guy admits he was wrong. It doesn't make it into the campfire version of the story, but it matters. Believe me, it matters more than the rest. Over the next 2 weeks, Eli and Fang became inseparable. The wolf moved out of the holding enclosure and into a larger, open-air run that Eli helped build with his own hands. He dug post holes. He strung wire. He hauled lumber from the supply warehouse, and for the first time in his life, the work he did had his name attached to it. People knew who built that run. People knew whose wolf was inside it. Fang followed Eli's movements with total devotion, not submission. The wolf never submitted. He never rolled over. He never exposed his belly. He never cowered. What he did was choose. Every time Eli approached, Fang chose to stay. Every time Eli touched him, Fang chose to lean in. It wasn't obedience. It was partnership. And here's the thing that really messed with people's heads. Fang's behavior with everyone else barely changed. The wolf was still dangerous, still aggressive toward strangers, still territorial, still sharp, still every inch the predator that had put warriors in the medical ward. He just had one exception, one person who existed outside his threat matrix. Eli. Cross my heart, the pack didn't know what to do with that information. Their entire social structure was built on the idea that authority flowed downward, alpha to beta to gamma to omega. Power came from rank. Rank came from strength. Strength was physical, measurable, undeniable. And yet here was the lowest-ranked member of the entire pack forming the single most significant bond with the most dangerous creature they'd ever encountered. It didn't fit. It didn't compute. It made people uncomfortable in ways they couldn't articulate. But it was real, and real things don't care about your comfort level. A month after the first enclosure session, Ronan called a pack assembly. Full attendance, every rank, every unit, every family. The fire pit in the central yard was burning high. People stood in concentric rings around it, breath visible in the cold night air. Ronan stepped into the inner ring. Bring the wolf. Eli walked in from the eastern path with Fang beside him. No leash, no muzzle, no chain. The wolf moved at Eli's hip, matching his pace stride for stride, and when they entered the firelight, a ripple went through the crowd. People pressed backward. Mothers pulled children behind them. Warriors shifted their stances, ready to react. Fang's ears went flat. His hackles started to rise. The crowd's fear was hitting him, and he was reading it as threat. A growl started building in his chest. Eli stopped walking. He put his hand on the top of Fang's head. Not a command, not a correction, just contact. His thumb moved behind the wolf's ear in a slow circle. Easy, he said. One word, quiet enough that the people in the back rows couldn't hear it. Fang's hackles settled. His ears rotated forward. The growl died in his throat. He sat down next to Eli and looked out at the crowd with calm yellow eyes. I need you to understand what that looked like to 300 people who had spent weeks hearing about the monster wolf that no one could control. They were looking at an Omega, the Omega, standing in the center of their pack with a wild wolf sitting calmly at his side, and the wolf was more relaxed than most of the humans in the yard. Ronan watched. Then he spoke. This pack values strength. We always have. We always will. He paused. But tonight, I want every one of you to look at what's standing in front of you and ask yourself what strength actually means. Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. Eli has done what our warriors couldn't. Not because he's faster, not because he's tougher, but because he understood something the rest of us missed. Control isn't the only path to trust. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is sit down, shut up, and let another living creature decide you're worth being near. Ronan turned to Eli. The alpha extended his hand. Not a handshake, an arm clasp, forearm to forearm, the way Ashwood alphas greeted their most respected fighters. From tonight, you're the pack's wolf handler, the first one in our history. The position carries beta rank, and a seat at the strategy table. The crowd made noise then. Not cheering, not exactly. More of a collective exhale, a release of tension that had been building for weeks. Some people clapped, some stomped their feet. A few of the warriors exchanged glances that were hard to read. Eli clasped Ronan's forearm. His grip was steady. His eyes were level. The Omega who'd walked into this office with his gaze on the floor a month ago was looking the Alpha of Ashwood Pack directly in the eye, and neither of them looked away. Fang stood up beside Eli, pressed his shoulder against Eli's leg and yawned. A full, wide, fang-displaying yawn that showed every tooth in his head. And for some reason, maybe it was the tension breaking, maybe it was the absurdity of this wild predator acting bored at the most significant political moment of the year, people laughed. Genuine, surprised, full-body laughter. And right there, in that moment, the legend sealed itself. Now, if this story taught you that strength shows up in ways nobody expects, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That's all I ask. One click, and you'll never miss a story worth telling. Here's the part that doesn't get told enough. The aftermath. Because legends don't end at the bonfire. Eli didn't become a different person overnight. He still ate last in the mess hall for 3 more days before Dara physically moved his tray to the beta table and told him to sit down. He still flinched when alphas raised their voices in meetings. He still walked the perimeter trail every night, alone except for Fang, because 7 years of being invisible don't evaporate just because someone hands you a title. But the title changed things around him. Slowly, steadily. The other Omegas in Ashwood started standing a little straighter, started making eye contact more often, started asking questions in work briefings instead of just nodding. One of them, a girl named Tessa who worked in the laundry unit, applied for a position on the perimeter patrol. She got it. Kyle never apologized to Eli directly. That wasn't his way. But one morning, about 6 weeks after the assembly, Eli found a package outside his new quarters. Inside was a hand-tooled leather collar. Not for Fang, because Fang would never wear a collar and everyone knew it. It was symbolic, decorative, the kind of thing a warrior would commission for someone they respected. There was no note. There didn't need to be. Fang lived another 14 years. In that time, he sired a line of wolf-dog hybrids that became the foundation of Ashwood's tracking program, the most effective search and rescue unit in the Northern Territories. Every single one of those animals was handled by an Omega. Eli trained them all personally, and Eli himself? He never climbed higher than beta rank. He never wanted to. He sat at the strategy table when it mattered, spoke when he had something worth saying, and spent most of his time in the wolf runs, covered in dirt and fur, doing the work that gave him purpose. But there's one more moment I need to leave you with. The one that people who knew Eli always came back to when they told this story. It happened 3 years after the bonfire assembly. A delegation from a rival pack visited Ashwood to negotiate a territorial boundary. Their alpha, a massive, loud, aggressive man named Dracon, walked into the central yard with 6 bodyguards and immediately locked eyes on Fang, who was lying in the sun near the strategy building. Dracon pointed at the wolf. "That's the wild one? The one from the stories?" He laughed. "Doesn't look like much to me. Looks like a pet." Fang's eyes opened. His body went rigid. The hackles rose. The old danger, the old wildness, it was all still there, coiled and ready, barely contained. Eli stepped between Dracon and the wolf. He didn't puff up, he didn't posture, he didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, 5'10", 160 pounds, looking up at a man who had 6 inches and 80 pounds on him. "He's not a pet," Eli said. "He's my friend, and friends protect each other." Fang stood up behind Eli, not growling, not attacking, just standing, present, shoulder to shoulder with the Omega who had earned his trust by offering nothing but time and patience and the quiet courage to sit with his back to something that could kill him. Dracon looked at the wolf, looked at Eli, looked at the wolf again. He took a step backward. His bodyguards adjusted their positions. The negotiation went smoothly after that. That night, after Dracon's delegation left, Dara found Eli in the wolf run, sitting on the ground with Fang's head on his leg. Same position as the first day in the enclosure. Some things don't change, some things shouldn't. You know you scared an alpha today, Dara said. Eli scratched behind Fang's ear. The wolf's tail swept the dirt once. I didn't scare anyone, Fang did. Dara shook her head. No, Fang was the muscle. You were the message. Eli didn't respond to that. He just kept scratching behind the wolf's ear, watching the last light fade behind the mountain ridge, sitting exactly where he belonged. And that, right there, is the legend. Not the biting, not the blood. Not the warriors with their chains and their muzzles and their certainty that force was the only language worth speaking. The legend is the quiet kid who sat down in the dirt, turned his back to danger and waited. Who understood that the most powerful thing in the world isn't the ability to make someone obey. It's the ability to make someone choose you. Ashwood still tells this story. The details shift a little depending on who's talking. The number of warriors injured goes up every year, and Fang gets bigger in every retelling. But the core never changes. A wolf that couldn't be tamed wasn't tamed. He was befriended. And the person who did it wasn't the strongest, the fastest, or the highest ranked. He was just the one who sat down.